Emma had always craved solitude, and the old apartment on the edge of town seemed perfect. The rent was cheap, the walls thick with decades of silence, and the neighbors scarce. She unpacked her few belongings quickly, savoring the quiet. But that first night, as she lay in bed, the weight of the darkness pressed down on her. The air grew heavy, and though she was alone, she couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was lying beside her. She turned her head, expecting emptiness, but the space next to her felt occupied, the mattress dipping slightly as if under an invisible body. Emma's breath hitched. It's just my imagination, she told herself. A new place, unfamiliar sounds. But then the whispers started. Faint at first, like distant radio static, they curled into her ears, forming no words she could understand. Just a murmur, a breathy sigh too close to ignore. She sat up, heart pounding, and flicked on the lamp. The room was empty. The whispers stopped. Emma exhaled, rubbing her temples. Stress, exhaustion, maybe even the remnants of a dream. She forced herself to lie back down, but the moment the light was off, the presence returned. This time, the whispers were clearer, almost playful. A cold fingertip seemed to trace her spine, and she jerked away, gripping the sheets. By morning, she'd convinced herself it was nothing. The sunlight streaming through the dusty windows made the night's terror feel foolish. But as she brushed her teeth, the mirror fogged unnaturally fast, and for a split second, she saw a shadowy figure standing behind her. She spun around, but there was no one there. The whispers lingered in her mind, whispering a single word. Emma. Emma had always prided herself on being rational, but the shadows in her new apartment refused to obey logic. At first, they were fleeting. Dark smudges darting just beyond her sight, vanishing when she turned her head. She told herself it was fatigue, the stress of moving, or the odd play of light through the old, warped windows. But then the whispers began. Late at night, when the apartment was silent except for the occasional creak of settling floors, Emma would hear it, a faint, breathy murmur, barely audible. It sounded like her name, stretched thin as if spoken through layers of cloth. The first time she froze mid-step, her heart hammering. She told herself it was the wind, or a neighbor's TV. But the whispers grew louder, more insistent, until they seemed to come from right beside her ear. One evening, she caught movement in the corner of her eye. A shadow detaching itself from the wall, slinking across the floor before dissolving into nothing. She spun around, her breath coming fast, but the room was empty. The whispers hissed again, this time forming words at Emma. You know I'm here. Her hands trembled as she fumbled for her phone, dialing the only person she'd met in the building. Mark, the neighbor downstairs. Mark was skeptical when she stammered out her story over coffee in his apartment. Sounds like stress, he said with a shrug. Old places make noises. Your brain fills in the gaps. But when Emma insisted, her voice cracking, he sighed and promised to check her apartment. Of course he found nothing. The shadows stayed hidden, the whispers silent in his presence. That night, alone again, Emma lay rigid in bed, staring at the ceiling. The whispers returned, louder now, almost conversational. You can't ignore me forever, they murmured. And then, clear as day, a shadow slid across the wall opposite her bed. A human silhouette, its head tilting as if studying her. Emma squeezed her eyes shut, praying for dawn. When she opened them, the shadow was gone. But the whispers lingered, humming in the dark like a secret only she could hear. Emma had always avoided looking into mirrors at night. There was something about the dim lighting, and the way her reflection seemed to shift, that unsettled her. But tonight, curiosity got the better of her. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror, the cold tile beneath her bare feet sending a shiver up her spine. At first, everything appeared normal, her tired eyes, the faint creases of exhaustion on her forehead. Then, without warning, her reflection blinked. Emma froze, her heart pounded so loudly she could hear it in her ears. The reflection, her face, had moved independently. She leaned closer, telling herself it was a trick of the light. But then the reflection smiled, a slow, deliberate curl of lips that she hadn't moved. Emma screamed, stumbling back into the wall. The smile widened, revealing teeth that seemed too sharp, too eager. She slammed the light switch, plunging the room into darkness, and fled to her bed, pulling the covers over her head like a child. When morning came, she almost convinced herself it had been a nightmare. That was until she stepped into the living room and found her furniture rearranged. The coffee table was shoved against the far wall, books stacked in unnatural pyramids, and her favorite photo frame turned face down. Her breath hitched. She hadn't done this. The whispers from the night before slithered into her mind, taunting her. Emma's hands trembled as she reached for the fallen photo. It was a picture of her as a child, standing alone in front of a carnival mirror, its warped glass twisting her image into something grotesque. A memory flickered, laughter, a voice telling her she was wrong, that she wasn't whole. She dropped the photo as if it burned her. The reflection in the mirror last night hadn't been an intruder. It was her, and it was waiting. That night she avoided the mirrors entirely. But as she lay in bed, She felt the weight on the mattress shift, the indentation of another body pressing beside her. The whispers returned, this time inside her skull. "You can't ignore me forever." Emma sat across from Mark in his dimly lit living room, her fingers trembling around the mug of tea he'd handed her. She had finally mustered the courage to tell him about the whispers, the shadows, the face in the mirror. To her surprise, he didn't laugh or dismiss her. Instead, his expression darkened. "I was hoping it wouldn't happen to you," he muttered, glancing toward her apartment as if expecting something to be listening. Mark confessed that the previous tenant, a woman named Leela, had lived there for 6 months before she was found dead in her bed. The official cause was a heart attack, but the neighbors whispered about the way she'd been found. Eyes wide open, mouth twisted in a silent scream. "She used to talk about the one beside her," Mark said, lowering his voice. "She said it whispered to her at night, touched her when she was alone. Everyone thought she was paranoid, but..." He trailed off, his gaze drifting to the floor. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. The air in her apartment felt heavier, as if the walls themselves were breathing. She knelt beside the loose floorboard near her bed. The one that had creaked strangely underfoot earlier. Prying it up, she found a small, leather-bound diary. The pages were filled with Leela's frantic handwriting, detailing the same horrors Emma had been experiencing: the unseen weight in the bed, the whispers, the face in the mirror. The final entry sent a chill down her spine. "It's not just beside me anymore. It's inside me now." Emma's breath caught as the floorboard creaked again. This time, not from her touch. Something shifted in the darkness behind her. She didn't dare turn around. Emma's breath came in ragged gasps as she threw her weight against the apartment door, the lock refusing to budge. The handle rattled uselessly in her grip, yet she knew she had unlocked it moments ago. The clock on the wall ticked past midnight, and with each passing second, the air grew heavier, thicker, as if the darkness itself was pressing down on her. She spun around, her back against the door, and stared into the blackness of her apartment. The whispers had escalated, no longer just her name, but commands, coaxing her back to bed. She resisted at first, clutching the diary of the previous tenant like a talisman. The entries had become more frantic, more desperate, until the final line: "Desire, it's inside me now." Emma's hands trembled as she traced the words, the ink smudged as if written in haste or fear. The presence wasn't just beside her anymore, it was with her, beneath her skin. A cold hand, her hand, yet not hers, gripped her wrist, pulling her toward the bed. Emma fought against the invisible force, her muscles straining, but her body moved against her will. The sheets were icy as she was forced beneath them, her limbs locking in place. The whispers coiled around her mind, soothing now, possessive. "You belong here." Morning light brought no relief. Emma woke with bruises ringing her wrists, her throat raw from screams she didn't remember making. The diary lay open on the floor, flipping shut with a snap. Pages she hadn't touched now filled with looping, familiar handwriting. Her own. And then she understood, it wasn't just inside the apartment, it was inside her. Emma stood before the full-length mirror in her dimly lit bedroom, her breath shallow and uneven. The air was thick with an oppressive silence, broken only by the faint hum of the refrigerator in the next room. Her reflection stared back at her, or at least, it should have been her reflection. But the face in the mirror was different. The eyes were darker, the smile too wide, too knowing. It blinked slow and deliberate, and Emma's blood turned to ice. "Who are you?" she whispered, her voice trembling. The reflection tilted its head, as if amused. "You know who I am," it answered, its voice a distorted echo of her own. "I've always been here, your other half. The part you buried so deep you forgot about me." Emma's hands clenched into fists. "You're not real. You're just stress, or sleep deprivation, or..." The reflection laughed, a sound that prickled like static. "Daniel won't save you. You've felt me for years. The anger you stifled, the desires you ignored. You called me the presence because you couldn't face the truth. I'm you." Memories flashed through Emma's mind: childhood tantrums slapped down, rebellious teenage urges crushed under guilt, the way she'd always smiled when she wanted to scream. Her reflection's grin widened. "See, you remember now. You made me into a monster. And now I'm taking over." The mirror's surface rippled like water. Emma staggered back as her reflection's arm lunged forward, but the glass didn't break. The hand emerged, its fingers curling around her wrist, cold as death. She tried to pull away, but the grip was ironclad. "Stop fighting," her shadow self crooned. "We'll be so much happier together." Emma's vision darkened at the edges. She felt something uncoiling inside her, slithering into the hollows of her mind. The last thing she saw before the darkness swallowed her was the mirror, empty of any reflection at all. The apartment was eerily silent when Mark pushed open the door, his heart pounding in his chest. He hadn't heard from Emma in days, and after her frantic calls about the presence in her apartment, he'd grown too worried to ignore it any longer. The air was thick with the scent of something stale, like old paper and damp wood. The furniture was untouched, the bed neatly made, but Emma was nowhere to be seen. His footsteps echoed as he moved through the space, his eyes darting to every shadow. Then he saw it. The diary, lying open on the floor near the loose floorboard where Emma had found the previous tenant's journal. His breath caught as he picked it up. The last entry was in Emma's handwriting, but the words sent a chill down his spine. "We are one now, and we are waiting for you." Mark's hands trembled as he flipped through the pages. The earlier entries detailed Emma's terror, her confusion, her desperation to escape, but the final pages were different. The writing was calmer, almost serene, as if the fear had been replaced by something darker, something accepting. He barely had time to process it before the door behind him creaked open. He hadn't heard anyone enter. The temperature plummeted, and the hair on the back of his neck stood on end. Slowly he turned. The figure in the doorway was Emma, but not quite. Her smile was too wide, her eyes too dark, as if something peered out from behind them. She took a step forward, and Mark stumbled back, his pulse roaring in his ears. "You were always so curious, Mark," she said, her voice layered with something else, something not human. "Now you'll see what she saw. Now you'll know what it's like to never be alone." The door slammed shut behind her, and the lights flickered. Mark's scream was cut short as the shadows in the room surged forward, swallowing him whole. In the stillness that followed, the diary lay open on the floor, untouched. Then, as if guided by an unseen hand, a new sentence scrawled itself across the page: "He's staying too." The apartment fell silent again, waiting for the next curious soul to cross its threshold.